Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the international best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And just a reminder, my home base is wedon'tdie.com, where you can always find great things like our free Sunday gathering inspirational service with a medium demonstration included. Did I say free? Yes, I did. Happens 2 p.m. New York time every single Sunday. It's on Zoom. We have a global audience. You can join us for that. We have classes coming up. We've got a Facebook group with almost 9,000 people. I've got a Patreon community. So if you're a super fan of my work and you wish to support it, I offer Patreon members episodes before the general public, commercial free. Also, between this show and then my podcast on iHeartRadio, which is called Shades of the Afterlife, I now have, believe it or not, 700 episodes. That's 700 hours about the afterlife. So Patreon members get a full list and you can search it. You can click on whatever you want to listen to or watch. Again, that's at wedon'tdie.com. Our guest today is Tony Rathman, who has specialized in spirit communication through both EVP and ITC, which is instrumental transcommunication, for the last 15 years, and today focuses on a method called Staticom. His method is derived from a European method known as direct radio voice, which has evolved into what now he calls Staticom, producing vocals from the unseen world, which he says it's arguably the closest thing to Thomas Edison's phone to the dead. You can find out more about Tony at his website, entityvoices.com, or if you go to YouTube, it's easy enough just to search Staticom. Let's meet him, hear his story, and get into this fantastic world of ITC. Tony, welcome to We Don't Die.
Thank you, Sandra. I greatly appreciate it. Excited to be here and looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, me too. Me too. Now, I read in your bio that you're like me, skeptic going in to all this. So if you could tell us first a little bit of your backstory, who you are, maybe where you are, and what got you interested in this. And then I also know, a whole bunch of the world of the people that came before you getting into the instrumental connection with the deceased. So over to you.
Sure. Well, believe it or not, I didn't believe any of this. 15 years ago, when ghost hunting shows started coming out, my wife started to watch them. And she kept saying to me, you got to see this. You'll love it. I couldn't last a minute. And I'd get up and I'd walk away. And I'm like, come on, this isn't real. This is television. And then part of it was because my father was a physics professor. And so as a kid, when I asked questions, Dad, why is the sky blue? He'd say things like, well, there's moisture in the air. When sunlight hits it, blue's the most reflective color that shines through that moisture. And that's why the sky looks blue. So there was no talk about, afterlife, consciousness surviving. That wasn't part of me growing up. So then one Valentine's Day in 2010, my wife says, I want to do something different. I said, okay, what do you want to do? She goes, I want to go ghost hunting. And I was like, oh boy, because I didn't believe it. I didn't think any of it was real, but I had two choices. I could take her or I could have her mad at me until next Valentine's Day. So I figured I'll take her. So I did some research online, found a place here in Phoenix, Arizona, which is where we're located, which had a reputation of being haunted. So I booked it for the weekend, bought her some relatively inexpensive equipment, knowing that it would probably be used once and then sit on a shelf for the next couple of years till we threw it away. And so I took her, I played along. She had a wonderful time, but it was when she got back and she started reviewing the photographs, the video camera, and the audio. And there was stuff on there I could not explain how it got there. She was calling me over every couple of minutes. What's in this photo? This wasn't there when we took it. Whose voice is this? You and I were the only one in the basement at 3 a.m. Who's answering this question? I was blown away. And so I tried to debunk it for like a month, couldn't do it. Finally said to her, let's go back and try again. Maybe there's lighting we didn't notice that were causing shadows. Maybe there were vents where voices were coming through that we didn't catch. So we went back and nope, couldn't find any vents, couldn't find any weird lighting, couldn't explain again what had showed up. So we went back again and again, and this is how it started. And now 15 years later, we're still doing it. But what fascinated me the most was an EVP, how I could get a voice from somebody who was not there, was not in front of us, was not in the location we were standing in, but yet with timing and relevance was answering the question I asked with intelligence. That absolutely fascinated me. So as the years went by, we developed and continued to focus on EVP. Then we switched over to ITC, or instrumental trans communication. If I could get answers via a digital recorder about what's called a record and review process, meaning I'd ask all my questions, but I couldn't necessarily hear the responses. I could only hear it when the recorder was replayed. So then you'd go home and you'd review it, and then you'd hear any responses that were there. But it didn't allow for communication, because by the time you heard it, understood what was said, the moment had passed. So that's what drew us into ITC, which is basically using, well, today it's most known in America as a spirit box, because Frank Sumption invented the spirit box, which scans radio. But before the spirit box, there was a device developed by Frederick Jurgensen and then picked up by Konstantin Radeve, as well as Marcello Bacci. And Marcello Bacci used it for about 35, 40 years, where it also used a radio, but sat on a single portion of the dial, whereas a spirit box scans up and down the radio. This would sit on a vacant station, meaning only producing the sound of white noise. And he got communication, two-way communication. He could ask a question and get a response. So my wife and I built spirit boxes for about 12 years, trying to improve them, make them quieter, make the communication more understandable. And we were able to do that. But the one thing we were not able to do was to lengthen the communication, meaning we'd get a word or two, maybe, once out of 100 times or 500 times a full sentence, but it was very rare. And the theory behind the spirit box was that entities would take the fragments of audio from the radio it's scanning up and down and rearrange them into their own sentences. Well, through our research, we determined that's not the case at all. In fact, no radio signal is needed whatsoever. All we needed was the white noise sound. So we replaced the radio with a white noise generator, live white noise generator, which produces every sound the human ear can hear from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. And with that, we were able to get full two-way communication, answers to our questions with timing and relevance and intelligence.
Incredible. Now, I've seen some of your videos, and even though we're not going to play them, could you talk about some of the questions you'd ask and like some of the responses that would come, just so people can get an idea what it is you're talking about?
Sure. I mean, we've asked everything. One of the first questions, and like I said, when we started to realize that this could be done and that the method that was being used worked, we had some counterparts a while back that brought back the direct radio voice method. Because like I said, Marcello Bacci had been tested by scientists and they couldn't explain how this was happening. So that method was reinvented, recreated in the 21st century to figure out, can we do it? Does it work? And it did. Then we moved to Staticom, and we've gone from Staticom to Staticom 2.0 and now Staticom 3.0, which has only existed for a couple of weeks now. But with 2.0, we were asking all sorts of questions, things like, okay, if these entities are no longer human-bodied, meaning they don't have ears, when I speak, I create a vocal disturbance in the atmosphere. And some other human with human ears, the follicles in the ear will vibrate. That vibration transfers to the liquid center of the ear, which then goes to the brain, translates it into speech. But if you don't have a human body, how do they hear me speak? Well, we asked that question. The answer came back. We call it death, energy of your mind. That's the thing. That was a phenomenal response to get back for a variety of reasons. One, in doing EVP work for 15 years, we would notice at times that the answer would show up on the recording before we even finished asking the question. This explains it. I don't have to verbally express it. They are getting it literally by me thinking.
I love that. I do. I do. Tony, in this time, well, there's a lot of grief happening in the world, and most of my listeners and viewers are people who have lost loved ones. I know we're not lost, but that is the expression we use. We have migrated to an unseen world. So we're looking for evidence that our loved ones go on. And I know you started off with the ghost hunting and things. Have you come to believe that our loved ones go on? Has the Staticom worked with connecting people to their loved ones, or you talking to loved ones in the
Absolutely.
afterlife? Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. So, one of the first connections was made by our former partners, and he got a message. It was too quick at that time, meaning they speak so fast at times that your mind can't comprehend it because it's literally coming out and so quickly that your brain can't even pick apart the words. But he literally got a message from both his mother, who had recently passed away a year or two ago, and his grandmother, both speaking, both responding to him, called out his name, said that they were connecting, and he had responded. His first question was, "Do you know who I am? Can you say my name?" And the response came back, "Ronnie," which his mother would call him. It's mom, it's Lucy, and Lucy was his grandmother, but they both talked. I had reached out to my grandfather and got him to connect and answer. My wife, mother passed away about 2 years ago. She was able to get messages from her. We recognized the voice. Her mother also spoke in Tagalog because my wife speaks English, Japanese, and Tagalog. So the voice came through in Tagalog. She picked it up immediately and said, "That's my mom." I said, "I know, I recognize the voice." So the implications for this are literally mind-blowing, because not only can a conversation be had, the voice can be recognized. So it supports the theory that consciousness very well does survive physical death of the body and goes on. I mean, we've had conversations. Marcello Bacci, who was the one who had used this device or a similar device, we've upgraded it, for like 35, 40 years. We got in contact with him. He responded to us. My wife said something like, "This is your method. Can you say something?" And clear as a bell, he said, "I'd say glad to meet you." And you could still hear the accent in his voice from the European language that he spoke. But what we really want is, we want science to take a deeper look at this, scientists, because these voices aren't coming from a radio anymore. They are coming from a process called stochastic resonance, which is basically using white noise to take an undetectable signal and make it detectable. That's where these voices are lying. But they are there, which means that spirits are constantly looking for ways to communicate, and they are very eager to communicate. And it's just a matter of being open enough to accept that they're trying to do this, listen to what they have to say, and devices like Staticom make it fairly simple to be able to have a conversation with consciousness that's no longer human embodied.
This is such good news. I know I've done a lot of work on my own with EVPs, and I've recorded some amazing things. I'm very close to Sonia Rinaldi and the team. She's done a lot of that, and then also visual now. But for people to know that their loved ones, really want them to know that they're alive, they're well. We've seen some great medium demonstrations, like I mentioned on our Sunday gathering. We see how close our loved ones are, that they're part of our lives. But there is something, Tony, that takes us from this hope and faith to knowing when you can hear a voice. Oh, you've given me goosebumps. Now,
Yeah, that's one of the really fascinating things about Staticom is that mediums are great. We've worked with them before. We worked with them with this method, but to be able to, instead of a third party telling you what they're hearing or what messages they're getting, for you to be able to hear it yourself and anyone else who's standing in the room, to hear them speak and respond to whatever question you ask, that to me is another step up, to be able to hear them for yourselves, hear it for yourself rather than someone else explain it to you.
absolutely. I completely agree. Now, is Staticom something that people can do themselves? Is it only one machine that you have right now and it's in development? How can we know more about it and what the future is that
Right.
we can be involved?
Sure. Right now, it's still in development, and we just, like I said, did an upgrade. It's a complicated system, though. Unlike a spirit box that you buy it, turn it on, and you can just start asking questions. This is a more scientific structure of sound, of the principle of stochastic resonance. It is a Frankenstein's monster of audio editing software, from frequency to noise reduction and everything in between. So, one of the reasons why we haven't just released it yet and turned it over is because A, the research is still going on, and two, even if we turn it over to 1,000 people to begin with, the number of questions, oh, hey, I turned it on, but I'm not getting what you're getting. What do I do? There's two of us, myself and my wife, to be able to handle that, answer questions properly, be able to instruct them, how to correct it, how to fix it. We would be overwhelmed and swamped right now. So unfortunately, until we figure out how that can be done, do we plan to release it? Yes, we do. Are we ready to do that right at this moment? No, I'm afraid we're not.
That's okay. You think of the cell phones when they first came out, these big clunky things. Oh my gosh. And then, look what we can do now. We can access
Right,
almost all of information in, 1 second.
right.
However, we're talking about this. People can see your work. You've got videos. Let's talk about your website. Let's talk about, 'cause I know people will want to research this and hear some of the examples, and tell us about some of the things you've recorded, what we can see, what we can find.
There is probably 150 or more videos up on YouTube if you just go and search Staticom. It is everything from communication with loved ones to answers to questions from a scientific basis that we want to know. Hey, how does this occur? How does this happen? Random questions like, how many fingers am I holding up, or what am I holding in my hand? The hardest part about asking questions is that A, we're scientifically minded, so we're trying to figure out information to get, but there are literally millions of questions. People always ask us, did you ask how the pyramids were built? Did Atlantis really exist? I mean, I could spend a lifetime asking questions and just see what responses come through. Is that a fascinating subject? Absolutely, it is. Being able to connect to loved ones. We also do public events with this where we're in front of a large group of people. We allow people to ask their own questions and get answers. And we've had people connect in public events with loved ones that they've identified the voice. The voice answered questions that only they would know. In fact, we did one up in Sedona a month or so ago, and a woman there had a son that passed away. And when he was in hospice, they created a code sentence. And she said, if this is really you, we had a code sentence. What is that sentence? The voice came through. I saw her face just go white. I heard what he said. I saw her face just go white. And she's like, that's him. That was our code.
Oh my gosh. I'm
Yeah.
filled with goosebumps with that. Goodness. On your website, would you be able to see where your live events are, what's coming up?
Yeah. We've put the live events on hold at the moment. They're going to come back
Okay.
up again. But like I said, because we upgraded Staticom, there's a whole testing process to make sure everything's working correctly as it should. And then, of course, there's the whole research side of it as well. What else can we learn about consciousness? Is it around us all the time? Which At this point, we know it is. They can see us, they can hear us, they can tell us what we're wearing, they know what we did, they can tell us what day it is. All of these questions and examples are shown on both the website. There's interviews that we've done explaining how it works, samples shown. So just about everything you can think of. Plus, we did a 3-part documentary on Paraflix. It is free to watch. It's about 3 hours and 7 minutes long, but it covers exactly how this breaks down, how we believe it's working, and there's a ton of samples in there as well.
Do we have to go to Paraflex, or can we find that through entityvoices.com?
There is a link on both the website and Tony Rathman Facebook page that takes you right to it. Like I said, it's free. It'll take you right to the link. You click and watch. It's that simple.
Okay, now for listeners and viewers, in the description, you'll be able to click on those live links because of the magic of technology that we can do that. So Sonia Rinaldi is a good friend of mine. And like I said, she's recorded voices and she's working now with pictures and things.
Right.
She's been doing this for well over 30 years. She's a miraculous woman. I've asked her what it takes to do this because a lot of people think if they get a recorder or if they just do this, oh, it should just be that easy. I know for myself, it was a long time before I heard voices. And what she says, it is a commitment. So those in the unseen world that work with you, whatever that team is, I imagine people all waiting in line to get their mouth on the microphone to come through, right? As the vision I have. But I believe that you and your wife have shown that commitment. So I think there's teams of scientists over on the other side that are working with you. It's just my gut instinct. But can you talk a little bit about that commitment? Because I know people want to pick up recorders and try things on their own. And I do think there's like beginner's luck. Sometimes they hook us, like they give us an example, and then we do this for ourselves. But it really takes that passion and commitment, correct?
It does. And it also takes a variety of time, and it can vary by individual, who that individual is, how open their heart is, how accepting they are of information that may be unconventional to what they were taught. That plays a major role. The other major role is things like trust, honesty, the ability of who you are plays just as big of a role in getting that communication as what device you're using. Spirits can literally manipulate most electronic devices. And a lot of people, like you said, will say, well, I bought a recorder and I tried EVP 4 or 5 times. I got nothing. So I don't think this works. Well, it does take time. They're looking at you saying, okay, are they doing this because they want to learn? Do they want to grow? Do they want a better understanding of what life is about and what the afterlife is about? Or are they doing it to post on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram to get likes? And, you can't hide that. Whatever your inner feelings are, whatever your intentions are, they're going to know right off the bat. But even if your intentions are good, it takes time. Before we started getting really clear communication, it was years. And not that we didn't get communication before that, but it was a word or two. It was enough to keep us going, keep us chasing it, keep us researching it. But anybody can do it. And your own personality, your attitude, your outlook will have a huge effect on how quickly it begins, how it develops. And the longer you do it, it just continues to unfold.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, to have that dedication, that commitment, that love, even when we are talking to our loved ones, one of the practices I always tell people is to picture their loved one, think of a happy memory, fun, filled with love, have them step forward, see if you can feel a little tingle or a little touch, or sometimes loved ones will put an image in your mind or a past memory. That's gentle ways of communication because, like you said, it is through thought. But if we do it once and we say, oh, didn't work, well, there's your loved one standing there in the unseen world, really wanting you to know that they're still alive and well, because it helps with grief to believe in the afterlife. It really does. So it is something that we talk to them. Okay, we're going to do this Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We're going to keep it going, because I don't think, Tony, that when we migrate to the other side, we're given all the information in the universe. I think we have to learn this probably too, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I believe that it's a shared universal mind that we return to. And I think that that knowledge within it, which I believe we're part of now, we're just separate and embodied in the human body. When that connection breaks and we return to the other side, I think we go back to that universal knowledge, which is shared knowledge. But you made a really good point about, if somebody does EVP 3 or 4 times and doesn't get a response, what I can tell you from 15 years of research is they can hear you regardless of whether you can hear them or not. So if you say to them, good morning, I really miss you, I hope you're having a pleasant day, they heard you. And we know that because we've had them repeat things to us that we said without any equipment, without any devices. And then we'll go, hey, I made a certain statement on such and such day, said it to you. What was it that I said? And boom, through the machine, they'll repeat the statement I said 3 or 4 days prior.
My goodness. And it is like learning a new language to an extent. I know once I got the hang of EVPs and I started getting communication and trusting, I would go back to my original recordings and there would be words on them. So I know for myself, my mind was picking up the sound of the white noise, and within that there were words. So I think with people, to have that patience and to trust, and also to be able to trust your instinct, because
And
like you said, they can hear us, but we may not be able to hear them. Doesn't mean they're not talking.
correct. That is absolutely correct. People always used to say, well, what do you think the biggest barrier is between the living and the dead? The simple barrier is the human body. Our sight is limited to visual sight only. We can't see infrared, full spectrum. There are a variety of other visual spectrums that the human eye can't see. Our hearing is limited to 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. There's a variety, ultrasound, all sorts of other sound frequencies that the human ear can't hear. So it's almost as if when you're alive and learning and growing, you're meant to be separated. But due to technology, due to open mindedness and the ability to accept dreams, images, other information that comes to you, you can break that boundary down. But you're absolutely right. I mean, they are there, they are watching, they are keeping an eye on you. And with devices such as static, I mean, it's super exciting because science, even today, even with the way that it's expanded, and they're starting to say we believe consciousness might survive death. Well, not might. When I can ask a question with no mics, no nothing but my own human voice standing in the middle of my house and get a response that answers my question to a T from somebody not in the house, that's pretty good indication that consciousness very well survives death.
Oh,
And
there's a
the thing
lot of
people always ask is, what
examples.
about pets?
Mhm.
Well, so do pets. Pets survive as well. We one time asked for a lost dog who passed away to bark. And sure enough, that bark came through from a friend of ours. When he asked the question, said the dog's name, if you're there, bark for me. Sure enough, the bark came right through.
It's
So pets have souls as well, and those continue.
absolutely. And the research I've done on near-death experiences and the veridical information, and simply put, that is things that people have witnessed while their body's lying there dead and they can't hear, they can't see, and they've floated up above the hospital. One of my favorite
Right.
stories is somebody saw a red high-heeled shoe up there, and they're like, well, that can't be. And somebody ran up to the roof, and on the top of the hospital,
Shoe
there
was
was
there.
that shoe. There is so much evidence, but we all have a big piece of us, Tony, that is skeptical. how do we trust and just kind of set that skeptical mind to the side for a little while?
Well, it's not easy to do. And for a lot of people, until it happens to them, like I said, I was completely skeptic of all of this. Didn't think it was real, didn't think it existed. And I grew up that way for 30 years. But then when it started happening to me, it was that personalization. One of the first EVPs I ever got, I asked for the name of whoever was speaking to me, and she gave her name. And that was so just mind blowing to me. And then I'd go back and I'd say her name, "Hey, are you there?" And she'd respond. And this was just EVP at the time. But it was that personalized encounter of, this is real, this exists. There's so much more to life than what we know or what science knows. And science doesn't explain reality or life. They explain how things function. They explain how behaviors predictable and what they expect to happen. But they don't tell you what life is or what it's about or how it exists. So all of those doors are open. So when you talk about the adventure of diving into a real treasure hunt of information, the afterlife is it. And it's once you start to go down that road and get information that supports what you're thinking, it's fascinating and just keeps pushing you along to find out more, dive in deeper, and see how far you can take it and what information you can receive from it. And that to me is absolutely fascinating and mind-blowing.
I agree. I'm now 27, 28 years into researching the afterlife with now, yeah, over 700 hours of episodes between this and Shades of the Afterlife. It is an onion that you just peel into the center and it never ends. And it's the sweetest onion. It really is. And it has such an impact on not only help through grief, but how we live life. When we start realizing that we're not just this
Right.
flesh and bone, then it's like, well, who am I? What is my life for? How do we make the most of being here on Earth? Do you have any thoughts on who we are as people and why we're here and getting the most out of the biggest bang for the buck, being human? Any thoughts on that, Tony?
Yeah, absolutely. We follow a theory called analytic idealism, which basically says that the one ontological primitive, and what that basically means is the one standard building block in life is consciousness. And we believe that to be universal consciousness. And life here on the planet, when we're embodied, is a learning experience. If universal consciousness is one mind and we're all part of that one mind, that mind can't learn itself or can't grow itself. So when we come back and experience 60 to 90 years of life, or hopefully more, that that teaches universal consciousness. And when we pass back over, everything that we've learned, everything that we now understand from that life gets transferred back to universal consciousness and allows universal consciousness to grow. The thing about life, though, is that it's entirely subjective to you and you alone. We can't read other people's minds. We can't see through their eyes. We can't hear through their ears. And every piece of life is an experience. It's mental more than physical. When something happens or we see something, and let's say it's a rock, and then science comes along and says, okay, the rock is 48 pounds and it's 12 inches by 50 inches, and science has kind of switched it and made the description of it or the measuring of it the thing. The rock is not the measurements. You can't measure something unless you've perceived it first, and that perception comes from consciousness. So that's what makes consciousness the ontological primitive or the basic building block. And all of life is subjective to you and you alone. You can have similar experiences with somebody else, they can say, okay, yeah, I saw that too, or I experienced what you experienced. But again, you can't compare the two because your human body senses are only available to you, and every person on the planet is like that. For consciousness or people not embodied anymore, that's not the case. They're sharing knowledge. That is why we can ask one spirit any question and they can pull back the answer for us, which is absolutely amazing to us. We can be talking only to one spirit and we can say, well, what's Marcello Bacci doing? Oh, he's doing this, because they're all connected. And that to me is one of the fascinating things. But, for people who are grieving from a lost loved one, nothing's going to make that easier from a perspective of that loss is there. And it seems permanent because they were embodied, they were in front of you, you could talk to them. They are still there, they are still around. You haven't lost them, you will never lose them, and they will be there in the future again in a situation where you can communicate, enjoy their presence like you did here, and probably even more so because you'll be lifted from the pressures of day-to-day life, the stresses, but there is no true loss in life because it continues.
Yeah. I heard once the great quote that our life is just a thread of the fabric of our soul. This is just a little blip. And we humans buy into it that this is the reality. And I think for me, one of the ways that we can disarm that skeptical mind is to start viewing life as everything is a miracle, down to the quantum level. All we are is vibrating energy, invisible vibrating energy, right? So when we
Right.
start to get down to that, we're a mighty realistic illusion, right? We are. But to start questioning that, it starts opening up that this other stuff can be possible and is possible.
You are absolutely correct. And, Nikola Tesla said way back, if you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And the more we look into that and the more we understand how it functions, I mean, people come up to us all the time and say, how are you getting a voice if they have no vocal cords? How is that even possible? Well, if you break down how the vocals work, we create a sound wave, which consists of energy, frequency, and vibration. That's how sound is made. And the great example of that is plucking a guitar string. The energy is in your finger plucking it, then it vibrates and produces sound through the energy and the vibration of it. If a spirit or consciousness is energy, frequency, and vibration, then producing vocals would be no concern whatsoever.
I love it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the future and what's possible. Tony, this morning I was having coffee, looking outside, and this beautiful bird just went sailing by. And I was thinking about my two idols, Wilbur and Orville Wright, and how way back these two guys who built bicycles had a dream. And look where we are now. All of the world functions on air travel, right? So here we are, Orville and Wilbur. Well, it's Tony and Cherie. Is that how you pronounce your wife's name?
Cherie, correct.
Cherie, and others that are working on it. There's, great minds. But what's possible with this? And then also, I know in an email you spoke about maybe someday tying in the visuals too. But what's possible for mankind?
All sorts of boundaries we probably even haven't been able to even reach yet, knowing, because we don't know where the boundaries of this technology is. But you're absolutely right. Tying it into like Sonia's visual, where not only can you get a picture of them, but you can hear them speak as well. A combination of those two would be absolutely fascinating. The information that comes through Staticom, we've been now experimenting and researching with it for the last 3 or 4 years. Any piece of information that we can get that we can then go research and find out, is this factual? Is it accurate? About 94% of everything that we were able to research is in fact the truth. In fact, there's a clip out on both YouTube, Facebook, that my wife wasn't feeling well. And I had Staticom running, and she's like, "Oh, I'm not feeling well. I'm in pain." I literally said, "Spirits, is my wife getting sick?" The answer was, "It's possible." I said, "What should she take?" And then this word came through. I didn't know the word, but I ended up looking it up after. The word was Percodan. Did not know what that was. Percodan is a prescription strength pain reliever, which you need a prescription for, but I didn't even know what the word was. So I had to go look it up. But sure enough, it was a prescription drug for pain, and for them to answer that. But knowing that that information we can get without knowing, without predetermining what's going to be said, one of the other future that we're looking into to use Staticom for is cold cases. Because when you talk about grief and you talk about a family missing a family member, not knowing where they are, not knowing what happened, that kind of grief doubles it because you're already missing them, they're already gone. But to be able to ask spirits, and we, through the research, we know that they will give us information from the past. They will not give us information future related. Even if I say something as simple as, "I have a choice, should I do this or should I do that?" They won't answer. Why? Because we believe they can't affect the life we were put here to live and to learn from. But past stuff, they will answer. So I'm thinking, and we've been researching it, we are getting responses we want, but to be able to help on cold cases for people grieving about a lost loved one, not knowing what happened, where they are, what occurred, this may be a great help in able to solve cold cases that have been mysteries since the 40s, 50s, or who knows when.
What good news that is. I never even thought of that. And the future's not yet written. We have free will when we're here. I think we come onto this planet to do certain things and learn, and there's different opportunities that we have. And
Absolutely.
so I'm not 100% bought into that, the future is written, because that would take the fun out of life, wouldn't it? I
I,
think.
I agree. And we were given free will for a reason. We keep it on the other side. I can tell you that just by the answers that we get. Like, for example, and not only is this an example of free will, but your sense of humor is still there. The person that you view yourself almost as a mirror or a shadow of yourself, the human body is what we look like to others. But when you think of yourself, it's more of an internal feeling of who you are. That is what continues to exist. But I said a very simple question. I said, "How many spirits are with me?" And a gentleman came back and said 300. And I said, 300? And then he said, "Yeah, she passed go," which I think Monopoly was 200, but I got his point. But then I said, "Did you say 300?" And the response came back, "What? Is that the wrong answer?" Like he was almost making fun of me. "You asked me, I told you." And it was like a comical response of, "Wait, why are you asking me again? Did I give you the wrong answer?" But the whole you as you feel yourself now is what you're going to be on the other side, and it without a doubt exists. Or there would be no way for us to be getting these answers. And back to your skeptic question, we have no radio. It cannot pick up walkie-talkies, satellite signals, cell phone signals. It has absolutely no ability to interpret any signal floating in the airways at all into voice. It's a white noise generator. That's it. It produces white noise. To be able to ask a question, we don't use mics. We don't use anything. I'm speaking like I'm speaking now, minus the mics on both sides of me. But then I get a response that answers my question with timing and relevance to the question asked and intelligence. That should not be occurring. Science needs to look at this. People who study consciousness need to look at this. People who do things like Sonia, if we can connect this method with their method, in the next 10, 15, 20 years, we might have, cell phones with video imagery to the other side or the afterlife. All of this is possible. And people have predicted this for as long as people searched what happens after death. And, they said technology will help bridge that gap. And it is. But like I said before, technology is only part of it. The person operating it, you're feeling and wanting to believe it to be true is what will bring forth the evidence to prove to you that this happens and does exist.
Tony, this is very exciting conversation. With our time left, is there anything else you want to share or questions I should have asked you that I didn't know to ask you?
No,
The
you
floor is
covered some
yours.
great
Yeah?
stuff. If anyone's interested in checking this out in person, we've got a variety of events. We're going to be in Halifax, Canada, November 1st, I think, talking at some folks
2025.
in
Because
2025, right?
somebody's going to be listening to this 2030. They're going to go, oh, what's happening? Go to the website.
But we will, once we research Staticom 3.0 a little bit more, make sure it's functioning as we plan it to, be doing group sessions again, and those will be around. And the more attention this gets, the more places we'll get to show it, do live demonstrations. So definitely check that out. The future of this is absolutely incredible. And it's something that can't be ignored anymore. The evidence is so strong that this is going to change worldviews. This is going to change views of the afterlife. And hopefully, like you said, bring comfort to those grieving the passing of a loved one, because you did not lose them. They are still there. And one of the other very important things is that, even with technology such as Staticom, it is great to be able to reach out and communicate to a loved one who has passed over. But the one thing we always say, and the most important thing, is express that to your loved ones here and now while they are still here. Because once that passing happens, there's a waiting game before it's going to happen again. So let them know that you love them, that you miss them, that you care for them today and now.
Beautiful words. Beautiful words. Tony, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you for having me. This was an absolute pleasure.
I loved it. And for our listener or our viewer, remember, you can go to Tony's website, entityvoices.com, or just simply go to YouTube and search Staticom. And
Correct.
again, if you are listening on a podcast or watching on YouTube, just go to the description below and you can click on some links to see what's happening and stay in touch with it all. Well, my friends, we're coming to an end of another great episode. As a reminder, you can go to my website, which is wedon'tdie.com. If you're not yet part of my email list, I have some really special goodies as a thank you gift if you'd like to join what I call my Insiders Club. But just go to the bottom of the page at wedon'tdie.com, enter your name and your email address. It says you get the first few chapters of my book. The truth is, it's the entire book. Chapter 10 is how to survive grief. If you're somebody who is experiencing a loss right now, our thoughts, our prayers are with you 100%. But that gives some really good information about what grief is, why it hurts so bad, some things to help move through it. And there's a bunch of other things there too. And there's some surprise gifts as well. So that's all at wedon'tdie.com. Of course, I offer the free Sunday gathering inspirational service with some friends of mine. Each week, about 200 people join us from all over the world. And it's a non-denominational service filled with music, filled with joy, filled with empowerment to live a really great life. And then the last 45 minutes or so, there's a medium demonstration. So you may just get a reunion with your loved ones. So again, wedon'tdie.com. In closing, my name is Sandra Champlain. I'm always so happy to be your host on We Don't Die. I do believe that life is an education for the soul and that your life here on earth is important. Yes, talk to your loved ones, the ones here on earth, and also the ones in the spirit world. While you might not be able to hear their voice back, they are with you, and trust that. Set that skeptical mind aside and just go forward knowing that they are with you. All right, my friends, I really want to thank you for listening or for watching, and we'll see you again soon.